Hello and welcome to our webinar. Our topic today is AI technologies in financial services, and our speaker is Will Johnson, who is the CTO and co-founder here at Ativio. So before we get started, I just want to go over two very brief housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so everyone who registered will get a follow-up email with a link to the recording that you're welcome to share with your colleagues. And the second item is about the Q&A. We have reserved some time at the end for a question and answer session, but you can enter your questions at any time during the webinar. Just use the questions panel of GoToWebinar. So with that said, I will go ahead and hand it over to Will.
Great. Thanks, Jane. Before we get started, I just wanted to ask some opening questions. Normally when I talk about this subject in a large room, and I think it'd be interesting for people to think about the answer to these questions. So in your organization, how many emails, chats, calls go in and out of your trading desk, compliance officers, things like that? How many in a given day? Generally speaking, and we've worked with a lot of the largest banks in the world, and the answer is in the millions, but it's a lot. Taking it a step further, the number of transactions that go on, and it's even more. Millions, hundreds of millions, even billions of transactions are flowing through major financial institutions every day. At another level, just the number of interactions that you have with your customers, with your employees, it far surpasses all of those put together. Usually if someone's going to make a call or email you, they're going to first engage with your website or having potentially already engaged in a transaction with you. So the number of actual interactions is really incredible. But I think what the most interesting question is how much of this do you learn from? How much of this makes you better than you were the day before? And for most organizations, the answer is not enough, that you're not really capturing and learning from all of this information, from all of your user interactions, chats, conversations, and just general interactions with your user base. And then one more is, who is setting your users' expectations? So what type of experience users expect you to have for them? And the answer is all of these companies. Everyone has an amazing experience in their personal life with their phone, with Siri or Alexa or Google or whatever their personal assistant is, with Amazon recommending products, Facebook recommending, friends and videos and things like that. And that's really the experience that consumers expect from your organization. And what this really means from Ativio's perspective is that search is not about the top 10 results anymore. It's not about a search box and just a list of results. It's a much more immersive experience where content is being recommended to you in real time, depending on where you are, who you are, what you're doing, what your job function is, or what type of customer you are. And search can power both of these experiences, but we see the really interesting applications and more valuable ones over on the right-hand side. And speaking of those use cases, Ativio, especially in financial services, really focuses on these three. So the first, unified digital workplace, is the sort of knowledge management and research use cases. It could be something as simple as intranet or site search, all the way to investment portals that focus on providing research information in a timely manner. Customer support is, call center support, and a lot of customers across, every industry really are trying to move to more of a self-service model. In some industries, things like preventive maintenance start to factor in, but this is really about your customer's experience when something goes wrong or when they need help. How can you make that experience as positive as possible and do it in the most cost-effective manner possible? And then the last, risk avoidance, factors heavily in the financial services space. We do a lot around communication monitoring using things like text analytics to understand what people are talking about and is it potentially fraudulent or risky behavior, anti-money laundering, case investigation support, and know your customer type solutions. It's the same, Ativio offers the same platform to power all three of these solutions. It's really just a different persona, a different user. That's the consumer, but again, the same base platform, same set of capabilities for all three solutions. And so just to take a quick tour of some case studies that we've seen, the first one is not in financial services, but it's a very common model, a common use case in financial services. was a sales enablement tool that was built by one of our customers really to bring together all the information about a customer for a salesperson. So you walk up to someone's door, you know what products they have, you know what issues they've had support-wise, questions, end of life, warranty, all that information is brought together so that you can have a more interesting and more engaging conversation with a customer. They saw about $350 million in efficiency gains in the first year alone. This company has a massive sales field, using the product every day. The second is an IT customer support system. This isn't a financial services customer. Anytime a service goes down, a server goes down, an application has an issue, a ticket gets created either automatically or by a user, and IT's job is to try to resolve that ticket as quickly as possible. And the way they can accomplish that in the shortest amount of time is to have the most relevant information, whether it be similar tickets, knowledge base articles, support documentation, just provided to them in real time. And so with Itivio in place, they saw a 91% reduction in the mean time to resolution, which is really their core KPI for this group. The next use case in communication surveillance, one of the risk avoidance use cases I mentioned, here the main goal is around being able to stay in compliance with the regulators, providing the proper monitoring of traders and their communications, whether they're email, voice, or chat communications. Being able to provide that regulatory compliance but do it in a cost-effective manner. And so a lot of the legacy systems in this space use very sort of rudimentary rules and keywords in order to try to provide this level of monitoring. They miss a lot of true positives, but more importantly, they spin off an incredible number of false positives. And all of those alerts have to be reviewed by an investigator. And so the main KPI that they were trying to drive is fewer false positives. How can we have the system provide, still be able to capture all the true positives and ideally capture more true positives, but not generate, well over 90% of the alerts coming as false positives. And so at Itivio, or with Itivio software, they were able to dramatically reduce the number of false positives and, really sort of manage their compliance in a much more cost-effective manner. And then last, AML investigation support, another use case in risk avoidance for financial services. As many of you know, every time there's an alert for a potentially fraudulent trade that has to be sort of resolved by an investigator, there's a whole set of work going on to reduce the false positives of the alerts, and that's certainly a useful area of investigation from a technology standpoint. But at some point, there will always be some number of false positives, and there's potentially tens or hundreds of thousands of these being spun off by banks every day. And what Itivio does is bring together all of the data sources that are necessary to adjudicate that case as quickly as possible. And so for this bank, we not only bring together that information, we actually automatically create the narrative that they can hand back to regulators. And this resulted in an 82% improvement in investigator productivity. So again, massive efficiency gains for fairly highly compensated individuals. They were also able to collapse their L1 and L2 analysts into a single group, and this has some obvious resource cost basis effects. Because the system was able to provide a lot more sort of a guided experience with all the data being presented to them in a standard form. They needed less sophisticated analysts to be able to work on the cases. So how do you go about doing all of this? There's really two sides of the equation. The first is on the left, understanding your content. You need to get a hold of all the data you can and really try to understand it. And the second is to understand your users. What are they trying to do? What are they measured on? What are their KPIs? Things like that. So first, content. You need to really get your hand on every data source that you possibly can, whether it's structured, unstructured, inside your firewall, outside your firewall, whether it's about customers, products, transactions. You need to first get a hold of that information, and more importantly, make sure you can respect the security permissions along with those data sources. So a case investigator might only be able to see certain pieces of information. Certainly in communication surveillance, users are tied to certain business units or certain trader desks or certain levels in the organizational hierarchy. So you need to be able to respect the security along with that. Once you have the content, you then need to be able to use a wide variety of text analytics capabilities in order to understand the content, from very directed capabilities, meaning you know what you want us to help with sort of pulling out of the text, to very discovery-oriented capabilities where you just need the Ativio platform to help you surface insight or trends in the information. And we support the entire spectrum from taxonomies and dictionaries and ontologies and patterns. Again, very directed, very simple and straightforward to set up, to much more discovery and looser or fuzzier capabilities that use machine learning and some other techniques to be able to surface things like sentiment and classification, statistical entities and key phrase type analysis to be able to pull out, again, those improbable phrases or interesting potential trends in your text. Again, first starting with content, and then this is really sort of the understanding of the content. Once you've done all of the text analytics, that can drive some really interesting user experiences, whether it's sort of showing content in place sort of marked up and highlighted, some analytics on that, and whatever web front end or BI front end. But it also enables you with the Ativio platform to ask some really interesting and very specific questions. So in this case, you can write queries that say, tell me which companies are mentioned together in the same sentence with IBM and the word acquire. So if you're looking at potential, M&A activity in the news, you can write questions that are very specific to your use case, and not get back a list of documents, but again, a list of companies that are mentioned in this context. Once you have everything marked up, you're able to sort of understand the context and the sort of the bits and bytes of the structure. You can then start to understand the relationships between these entities. So Apple is a company, Steve Jobs is a person, iPhone's a product. They might be related to each other. There's some pretty straightforward relationships you can glean. But then you can also start to look at some higher order relationships as you scan larger volumes of text and see that Apple and Berkshire Hathaway are often mentioned together in text, and maybe even look at the key phrases surrounding those to understand the type of relationship. And this is sort of the next level of text analytics and query analytics. And so then moving on to understanding your users, and this is, I think, some of the most interesting work that's being done today in the field and at Ativio. It's important to understand a few things about sort of your user base. Number one, they're constantly telling you things about themselves based on their actions. This is the model that the Facebooks and Googles of the world have really mastered in capturing everything that you do with their system to try to understand you better. Your customers have given you tremendous insight into their preferences. Potentially what industries or verticals are interested in, what equities are interested in. You may have notes or call logs that have gone on with wealth managers at your organization. So you have a tremendous amount of insight into their preferences and their sort of long-term plans. And more sort of taking it down a step further, you have more data about your employees than anyone. You may know all of this information above, but you also know where they live, demographic information. You have a tremendous amount of insight into your employees that you can drive to give your employees a better experience with your systems. And the first step is to capture everything, whether it's clicks, likes, shares, trades, location, time of day, organizational information. Really capture everything. Some companies are looking at doing things to look at how long people are hovering mouse over a particular link. Really everything that the user does with the system can be captured and then used for downstream purposes, which we'll talk about in a minute. And those usages are really around machine learning based relevancy. So how can you use the user's actions to build models, and more importantly, build models based on who they are, based on potentially their user group or user segmentation, a cohort, a department, or potentially all the way down to an individual. And these can help drive relevancy at a high level, but also personalized relevancy. So based on my holdings, based on my age and other demographic information, show me content that's relevant to me, not necessarily sort of the wide variety of users. But you can also use it for something we call social relevancy. So how can my clicks and preferences and interactions impact other potential new users who come to the system who may have similar demographic information or similar other preferences, but haven't sort of exercised the system or interacted with the system enough to generate sort of some of those recommendations. It can also be used for just general recommendations. You liked X, so you might also like Y, and answers to questions. So how can we provide, again, that list of the top 10 results type experience, and just give someone the answer for the price of an equity or the current regulations around a particular vertical or industry or something like that. And one thing that's often left out is that these models should continue to learn over time. So as users continue to use the system, they should adapt. There will always be new content, even new industries, new verticals, new geographies and interactions between those. The models need to adapt, both at the configuration side, but just at the sort of raw data capture and algorithm side. They have to continue to get better. This isn't a static problem. And also, you really can't forget NLP on the query side. You need to understand that it's becoming increasingly common, even for me, to type questions into web interfaces or to use voice input, which doesn't lend itself to the 1 or 2 keyword style query that we're used to 5 or 10 years ago. So people are asking questions like, who's the CEO of a company? Or the best pizza in a particular geography, and they expect answers. They don't want, again, a list of documents to be able to be returned. But you notice one thing with even with Google, with all of their resources, all of their capability, they still enable you to provide feedback on the answers. So they're not, it's not an exact science. It's not 100% guaranteed that these are the best pizza places in Toronto, or that David McKay is still the CEO of RBC. There may have been a change that happened recently, or it may be sort of at the longer tail of their knowledge graph, and so they still provide their users a way to provide that feedback. And what it really comes down to is intent, that people are looking for answers. They're looking for experts on topics, summaries, prices of assets, FAQs, knowledge bases, locations of things. If you think about, again, in your personal life, when you interact with Google or Bing or Siri, you're usually looking for one of a few different types of things. If you can handle even just a few of these, it goes a long, long way. It makes sort of you as an organization, as a technology provider, really seem like you're on top of your game. And it's not that hard. You don't have to solve every potential question that a user could ask. If you can solve 80% of them with just a few sort of query intents or query frames, you can really move the needle for your company. And so bringing it all together, over on the left, again, getting access to every type of data you can, understand it with NLP and text analytics and machine learning, again, whether it's statistical entity extraction, machine learning-based classification, sentiment analysis, pulling in taxonomies and ontologies, doing everything you can to enrich and understand your content before putting it in a secure universal index. And then over on the query side, you can build, a wide variety of different applications and interfaces. But if you don't understand your users, if you don't understand who they are, the types of things they're interested in, and the queries that they're asking using, again, natural language processing and machine learning, your user interface will fall pretty flat. But if you have all of those, to be able to query the index, query all the enriched content, you can build some really incredible user experiences. And with that, I'm going to flip over to a demo really quickly. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah, so great. While Will's getting set up, I'm just going to cut in, and I'd like to remind the audience that you can ask questions at any time. Just type your questions into the GoToWebinar question box.
Great. So I'm going to run through this demo fairly quickly. I won't exercise everything, but just to set the stage, this is a demo that we built for a large bank here in the U.S., and they wanted to understand how events in the news, what they call catalysts, impact their customers' holdings and for private wealth managers. So as a wealth manager, you would log into the system every day and be able to understand what's the most interesting news of the day, but also who should I contact based on that news. And so first they provided a dashboard here. Oh, sorry, I got timed out. 1 second. Hang on. There we go. Sorry. So the dashboard itself will give you, just some quick overview. There's 124 catalysts that concern your client. So this is secure to only show me the customers that sort of I manage. It shows you some of the solutions that are affected. So some of the products that the bank offers that are relevant to, again, your customers based on the news. It shows you the market value that's being addressed by those solutions. It also shows you the top clients that are affected. So Jenny Cazorla has had 15, again, sort of catalysts or news events that have occurred in the last day that impact her portfolio. And so we could drill into that in just a second if we wanted to. We also give you some metadata about the news that's happened, some of the key phrases, some of the trending timeline, things like that, as well as some metadata about the news sources, and then some entity extraction we've done on the news to figure out what the news stories are about at a corporate level. But for now, I'll just click in and just quickly jump into Jenny Cazorla's profile. And what this will do is generate a 360-degree view of this customer, showing me what she's invested in, at what dollar figures, the top catalysts or the top news stories affecting her positions, and then the actual positions themselves, and then potential solutions that you might want to cross-sell or upsell her based on, again, the news and her standing in the market. So just a quick way to, again, jump right in and understand everything you would need to know about Jenny if you were reaching out to her or if she happened to call in. Instead, if you wanted to take a sort of news-centric view of the data, you can click on the Catalyst tab, and what this will do is show you all the news. And the last time we sort of went and scraped the web for news, this was around when Qatar was in the news with all the issues they were having. And so here we're showing you the top news, and this isn't a sort of social media relevancy type algorithm. It's based on market value. So for a private wealth manager, the most important news is the one that affects your bottom line the greatest. And so what we've done here is summed up all of the positions for all of the customers that are impacted by this particular news story. So this news story mentions these 3 companies, and a number of these news stories mention the same company, but they're sorted by total market value. So as we scroll down, the numbers will go down. And we can immediately see the top affected positions by that. So this Qatar issue affect Qatari sovereign. Sally Robbins happened to have a $33 million position in Qatari sovereign. So we can jump into the news story, or we could jump right into that customer and see how she's affected by this news story, but how she might be affected by others as well. And again, jumping right into the position. So lots of different ways to slice and dice the data. Whether you wanted a client-centric view, which again will sum up the market value for that customer. You can slice and dice it by the companies they're invested in, by the products that they're invested in, product types, currencies. All of the sort of traditional search capabilities are there, as well as the relationship and unification across all these different data sources. There's also a solutions view as a product manager if you wanted to understand which of your products are most heavily affected in the market today based on, again, the news and the positions in those. You could see that as well. So this really sort of brings together a lot of the capabilities that we talked about with natural language processing to understand the content, as well as understanding who the user is so that they can only see the data that they're allowed to see and provide them with the most relevant experience.
Great. Okay, thanks, Will. So reminder for the audience, we'll do a very short Q&A session right now. You can enter your questions in the question box of GoToWebinar. And we've got a couple questions here in the queue. So we'll just take as many as we have time for. So first question for you, Will. Somebody is asking, why should we consider Ativio instead of open source?
The open source community is certainly doing a lot in the space, especially as it relates to search. I think what it comes down to is sort of the size and sophistication of your team when it comes to search, when it comes to text analytics, machine learning. There's a lot of technologies and a lot of capabilities that are built into the Itivio platform that really come out of the box in a fully operational stack, as opposed to building it yourself. A lot of our customers, it really comes down to time to market, and when you consider the licensing costs versus the staffing cost of building it yourself, the math is pretty easy. Also, from the Itivio perspective, sort of versus the competition, a lot of people like open source because they feel like they can get in and really tweak and tune it and build what they want. And the Itivio platform is designed to support that model. It's a very open platform that lets you integrate your own capabilities, your own IP. If you think you have a better entity extractor or a better document classifier or a better machine learning based model for relevancy, you can plug those capabilities in, but still take advantage of the rest of the platform for operations and scale and all of the other capabilities that you might not have expertise in or have interest in building and supporting.
Good. Okay. Next question. How does Itivio handle highly sensitive data like customer information?
A great question. It's, in almost all of our financial services implementations, there's some amount of security involved. Whether it's customer data, transaction data, demographic information is oftentimes under regulatory jurisdiction, especially when you in Europe and other countries. The Itivio engine supports what we call active security. That's a security model that's built into the engine itself. It allows you to attach. It allows you to index not only documents, but also the permissions for those documents in the index, as well as the users and groups in your organization, whether those are internal or external customers. And then the security is applied at query time. So you can update the security information completely ad hoc without having to reindex. But you can also run very efficient queries against the index to ensure if you're a private wealth manager, you can only see your customers, or if you're a customer, you can only see your transactions.
Good. Okay. So next question. Is Itivio doing any work related to MiFID II?
Yes, we are actually. We have a couple use case or a couple implementations around MiFID II, most specifically around the regulatory requirements for research. So this is somewhat related to the previous question around security. The MiFID II requirements that state that you can't give away research to drive trading activity. Play well into our active security model. So customers are retooling their research portals to attach security permissions onto those pieces of research, and then using our security model to enforce it such that they're in compliance with MiFID II.
Okay. Okay, so next question. How much of the Itivio software is open source?
So we do make use of open source software in our platform where it makes sense. I think any modern software company should. There's no point in reinventing the wheel when it comes to things like logging infrastructure and things like that. We do extend and customize open source where that's possible, but it is a proprietary engine across the board. We do have open source components and very open SDKs and extension points, though, for customers who want to get in and customize the platform. So there's an open source search UI and widget set for building custom applications on the front end, and they're very well documented and public SDKs for building client-side applications and for building server-side plugins. So if you want, again, build your own machine learning-based document classifier, there's an SDK you can get up and running in 5 minutes off of GitHub to start developing that specific IP.
Great. Okay. We'll go ahead and wrap it up now. That's all the time we have for today. Before I let you go, I do want to make sure everybody's aware that there is a free download available of the Itivio platform. So you can get up and running and see how it works within just about 5 minutes. And to get to that, just go to our website, itivio.com. You can go to /free trial, or you can just click on the green button at the top of the website. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's been a really good interactive session here. And thank you so much, Will, for your presentation.
All right. Thanks, everyone.